Good morning. Thought we'd talk a little bit about the difference between the image of an object and the object itself. If we consider, say, a particle that we're going to view with the microscope, and we have a beam of light coming into the microscope and impacting on that particle is going to interact with the beam in a number of different ways. Some of the light that comes into that image, into that object, is going to be scattered right straight back. Some of that light is going to be scattered by surface irregularities. Now, the image that we see of the object is going to depend upon how we view it. If we're viewing from down here, we're going to see the light that's reflected directly back at us. If we're viewing from over here, we're going to see the light that's scattered. And those are going to give us two images of this object. Object is the same, but the image is different. Let's look at a little pyrite cubic crystal. If we look at the light that is coming in and reflecting directly off of the object, then we just see the shiny surface, the shiny flat surface of the cube. But if we instead direct the beam off axis, we look at the scattered light, now we see all of the striations that are on the surface of this crystal. Those striations are also natural. Those occur naturally on the surface of a cubic pyrite crystal. Some of the beam is actually going to go into the particle. In the case of pyrite, the depth that it travels into the pyrite crystal is extremely small. It can be measured in angstroms. But for a transparent crystal, the light travels completely through the crystal and comes out the other side. Now here's an octahedral pyrite crystal. All we'll ever see are the surface faces of this crystal. We won't see if there are any imperfections or variability in structure that's inside this octahedral crystal. If we look at a transparent mineral like fluorite, this is a natural fluorite octahedral structure, then we can now see differences. For instance, part of the crystal is colored, and part of it is essentially colorless. The color is due to the light that's absorbed as the beam travels through the crystal. That's information we would never receive if we only looked at the reflected light off the surface. We can also see that there are small mineral inclusions inside the crystal. That's information that we wouldn't be able to retrieve if we weren't looking through the crystal. There are a number of other interesting things that occur when you send a beam of light through a crystal. For instance, this is a calcite crystal, and we've drawn a little X on this crystal. When we look at the crystal, just looking at the reflected part of the light, we can see a single X. If we turn the crystal over and now look through the crystal, we suddenly have a double image of that X. Now, what's the true image? In fact, they're both true images. They both are telling us something about the structure of this crystal. Doesn't make any sense to talk about the true image of an object. Every single image that object gives us is giving us part of the information that makes up the object. As we're looking at the beam that travels through the crystal, again, we can look at the light that travels straight through. One of the things that we noticed in looking at the fluorite crystal is that there were little inclusions. Now we can see those inclusions looking in this direction. But if we instead look at the light that's scattered off of these features, light is scattered in all directions, then now, looking from over here, we'll see the light scattered off the object, and those little features will show up predominantly. We won't be gathering the light that's coming straight through. That's optically referred to as dark field illumination. These objects that are internal show up because their optical properties are different than the optical properties of the bulk material. Anything that has optical properties different than the bulk material show up. If that wasn't true, we wouldn't be able to see anything in the everyday world. If everything had the same optical properties, the world would be invisible to us. It's differences in optical properties that allow us to see features. These could be bubbles of air in a quartz crystal, for instance, and they'd show up quite nicely. They could be little magnetite inclusions in a quartz crystal. Again, they'd show up quite nicely. Or rutile, any number of materials that might be inside that crystal that have different properties. If we look at this slide has a deposit of rhodium D on it. The beam that travels through the dye looks nice and purple, very distinctive. But if we look at the light reflected off of the slide, it now looks yellow. That again shows the difference between the object and the image. Both images are true. Both images are telling us something about this material. Neither image is really the object itself. There's a lot more information that we can gather from the object itself by looking at it in different ways.